I'm delighted today to be joined by Marta Gonzalez Perez, who is Head of Sanctions and AML Regulatory Advisory at Euroclear. So welcome, Marta, to the Transform Finance podcast today. Yeah, lovely that you could join us. So Marta brings a truly global perspective to financial crime, sitting at the heart of a market infrastructure that plays a really critical role in the financial system. And I think your work obviously spans across AML, sanctions and regulatory advisory. And I'm sure that involves navigating really complex, fast evolving requirements across multiple jurisdictions as well. So a really warm welcome to you today. To start us off, I thought, first of all, maybe could you give our listeners a little bit of context around your role at Euroclear? I think that would be helpful, just in terms of how that translates perhaps into managing sanctions and AML or risk at a global level, just to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Jane. Well, in my role, it's a second line role. So I'm part of the compliance department, providing services to the operating entities of the Euroclear group. So we have Euroclear Bank, which is the largest and the more exposed entity of the group. But then we have the local central securities depositories in the different European markets. From the central unit, we provide services to all of them, making sure that we apply consistently the same standards across the group where possible, of course. And making sure that we develop policies, procedures, controls to safeguard the company as a whole. My role is indeed an advisory role. I work in close collaboration with the AML compliance officers of all the entities and with senior management, both of my own division and also in the entities as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. And that's really helpful to know. Very busy lady indeed. So I think just to kick us off, over the past few years, obviously sanction regimes have become faster, broader, more perhaps politically charged as well. How, in your view, has that changed the operational reality of running a sanctions program at scale?
Well, indeed, you have very rightly said that in the past years, sanctions have become almost daily, resulted in a daily need of adaptation. For entities like ours that operate in the international financial markets, it's important to follow closely the sanctions regimes applicable in different jurisdictions. Therefore, figuring out whether those are aligned, whether there are some divergences, or whether there are contradictions among them becomes crucial to ensure that you remain within the boundaries of where is permitted and you do not enter into problems in any of the jurisdictions. Sanctions have not been only increasing in volume and in amounts. If you see the number of designations, individual persons, entities, sectors of activity, products that have become sanctioned in the past years is really impressive. But it's also the complexity. In past years, we had more plain vanilla type of sanctions. So the beautiful, easy days of an asset freeze. Yeah, sanctions, person listed, you blocked absolutely everything, and your job is done. In simple terms, these days that doesn't happen anymore. So in addition to the speed, the volumes, the divergence between regimes, you also face an increased complexity where some activity is permitted, but some activity is not. If you multiply that for at least 3-4 main sanction programs that we all need to follow carefully, that makes it quite challenging when it comes to the operational part of it. Also, systems in the financial sector, in particular in the security sectors, are not designed to be broken down. Flows are meant to happen automatically to bring efficiency and cost saving into the financial market. So, of course, if you need to intervene and put manual stops to be able to monitor compliance with a certain sanction regime, and tomorrow you need to change that manual step into something else, that can create delays that in turn create additional risks in terms of liquidity, market efficiency, settlement efficiency. So, yeah, when a few years ago sanctions was more a matter of second line, taking in place certain controls and addressing them to selected areas in the business, now is a corporate-wide management of risk with the involvement of everyone.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that, for expanding on that. And you touched on the complexity as well. You actually might well have covered some of this, but in terms of the biggest challenges you face when trying to align different regulatory expectations and sanctions regimes, could you maybe elaborate or comment on that?
Yeah. Well, crucial is to have a proper regulatory follow-up. You cannot miss on a new designation, a change of sanctions regimes, or guidance that is issued by the authorities. That's the first part. I mean, you need to be on the ball. You need to be able to interpret it quickly. You need to be able to translate it in clear terms to the persons that will be in charge of monitoring and responsible for the controls to make sure that you get it right. One of the risks that we have seen also in the past years is that in case of doubt, you tend to be very conservative. No one wants to face the breach of sanctions. Everyone needs to have the systems and the environment well protected. So you run the risk of doing too much. And if you do too much, that can create additional risks. So it's a very important balancing exercise. So follow up closely, be sure of what you have to do, and try to make sure that your systems are supporting that targeted approach. We have seen also that even though, for example, in regards to Russia, there has been largely alignment between the main sanction authorities, there is not a 100% correlation. There is not 100% alignment. And typically we see a difference in the timing of the implementation. This creates very, very, very heavy complexities at an operational level for the reasons that I already touched upon. So if you need to include a manual step in your process, so let's take, for example, UK goes first and sanctions a party, then you will say, okay, I need to comply with these sanctions, but if there is no connection with the UK, I could still allow certain activity. So maybe to be able to control that UK exposure, you will need to segregate assets on a monitored account. You can let other activity go, provided that you get all the comfort that nowhere in the chain there will be a UK connection. So you prepare all that. It's manual. It takes time. It's labor intensive. And then 3 days later, the US follows, and then you start all over again. So that's really a complexity. But obviously, you cannot, because one sanction authority decides that a party is to be sanctioned, you cannot limit all the activities. So, yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, that's really interesting and obviously very relevant right now with what's going on. So I'm sure this will resonate very much with the audience. So yeah, really important point there. Maybe that leads on perhaps to talking a little bit around collaboration in the ecosystem. When we look at financial crime, we see is increasingly an ecosystem challenge, basically. So how important is collaboration in the sense that what does meaningful public-private partnership actually look like in practice? Where is collaboration, let's say, actually working, and where do you think perhaps it's a little bit too slow or still fragmented? Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think it's key. Is fundamental, and it's in the benefit of both the public and the private sector. From our experience, we have a lot of active interaction with other private sector representatives through industry associations, where we have tried to reinforce standards. We provide common feedback to the authorities, so to come with a stronger voice when you go like a full community to tell your competent authorities that certain measures are difficult to interpret, they are difficult to implement, or the intent is not well understood. It has more value than if you go on your own. So that's an avenue that we actively use, and we see certain positive response from the side of the competent authorities. Equally important is obviously to maintain a good dialogue on a one-to-one basis. If you have a good relationship with your competent authority, if you can pose questions, both in a formal way, because you need a formal answer to be documented so that you have the real guidance that you can prove that you obtain, but also on an informal level, when you can indeed explain the complexity that you face. They explain to you how it's also complex on their end, and then you try to come up with ways of making things work, if not better, at least in a more dynamic way. So yeah, absolutely fundamental, key. I will appreciate more effort between the authorities themselves to open that line of dialogue and collaboration, to make sure that measures are as aligned as possible, and that indeed the complexities that, for example, if the US goes first, the US financial sector will feed OFAC back with some problematics, that those are taken into account by other sanction authorities that are contemplating to follow. So I think this is still some work that can be done, but certainly an area that is key for the success of the future of the implementation of sanctions or any other financial crime controls for what it matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really important point you raised there. So yeah, that makes sense, which perhaps also leads on to I was going to ask you a little bit around governance and board accountability. I think given heightened regulatory scrutiny on sanctions breaches, etc., how has board level, do you believe, evolved, and what does effective governance look like perhaps in this space now?
Yeah, it's extremely important. I mean, sanctions, at least in our organization, is seen as a strategic risk, and has all the focus and attention from senior management and the board. They set the tone and the strategy. They allocate the necessary resources so that indeed the proper maintenance of the frameworks and the controls can be secured, and they receive regular reporting. So yeah, it's one of the areas. I mean, similar to any of the other risks that are monitored at that level, and on a regular basis, they get indeed information on how we are. In the past, they receive information, if you want, and I think it's common in the industry. Board was hearing about sanctions in case there was a problem, in case there was a breach or a potential breach. Nowadays, they are receiving information on how well are we doing, what are the difficulties that we are facing, and I don't know, how are we in terms of reporting, for example, etc. So yeah, it's not a secret that we have been quite in the news because of the Russian sanctions. So all that visibility that has been created externally, you can imagine that is yeah, certainly internally too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So thank you for that. And again, looking ahead, we were talking about where we are now. I guess that we've talked about that a lot currently, the current situation, and also, but trying to look ahead, future outlook. Let's say next 3 to 5 years. What is the financial crime risk that perhaps concerns you most in the current sort of capital markets infrastructure? Do you think firms are prepared for it, or indeed, what should firms be doing now to prepare? Let's say.
Yeah, well, we are living very uncertain times. That's, I think, fair to say. It's very difficult to predict how things are going to be moving forward. So, one of the main difficulties that we are facing is that we need to be prepared for almost any scenario. Um, we can prepare for a continuous alignment between sanctions authorities if we speak about sanctions. We can prepare for complete disalignment and going back to the days where we need to protect the European actors against the measures taken, for example, in the US. Extraterritoriality is becoming more and more a tool that is used everywhere. Um, so that's something that we need to be prepared for all kind indeed of different scenarios.
Absolutely.
And then in Europe, we have the anti-money laundering regulation that comes into effect mid 27. We have the new anti-money laundering authority. There again, there are additional expectations in terms of compliance and safeguards for the prevention of financial crime. And yeah, we are trying to get prepared for that. I don't see it as a major revolution, but certainly will require some improvements and enhancements, which of course, coupled with the technology, innovation, and the boom of artificial intelligence, is creating certain, I mean, not challenges, but it's keeping us extremely busy trying to juggle all these things at the same time in preparation for the future, whilst the future is quite uncertain.
Absolutely, yes, exactly. And what's your view on that with the AI? Just if I might ask you, just throw that in there. Can you expand on that further?
Well, we as a market infrastructure, we are not typically the first adopters of these new technologies, but we are working on that. We are trying to implement some tools and use artificial intelligence where we can to simplify some of the processes that rely a lot on human intervention. Uh, I think there is a lot of potential, and indeed, if we can simplify certain of the processes that are more um, standard, if you want, the collection of a document and the making sure that it meets all the necessary criteria, that it contains all the necessary data points that are required, and that those data points are stored in a way where they can be properly monitored. That will help us to do our job more efficiently, will free up time of employees that today are doing maybe not such an adding value tasks, and will help us to improve in the fight against financial crime. So I'm positive. Then again, I am not a believer that technology will replace human judgment. We see it today. Maybe we don't have the most advanced tools yet. Tools are extremely useful. Obviously, you cannot screen trillions of transactions that pass through your books on a yearly basis without automated systems. But it's also true that without the human value that the ones that are in contact with the clients bring to the picture, you don't get the total understanding of the things that are happening and why.
Yeah, that makes sense. So thank you for that. And I threw that one in there, that question in there. But as we were talking about technology, that's great that you've elaborated on that. One final question from me, just in terms of perhaps if you had one piece of advice for senior leaders who are responsible for sanctions and AML today, what would it be? Like, what advice would you give them?
Don't think that you have it all under control. Keep on challenging yourself. Look back, look forward, listen to your to the experts across the organization, not necessarily only to your legal team or to your compliance team, but to everyone, and try to build an end-to-end flow of how you monitor and control and make sure that both AML and sanctions are managed in the organization from the very first reading of what is required to do to the documentation of decisions made, reporting sent internally and externally. And ideally also in view of the convergence at regulatory level with sanctions becoming part of the AML framework, and make sure that both systems, in case they are not speaking to each other, come closer. KYC information collected in the process of AML compliance is crucial for sanctions compliance and vice versa. So that's my biggest piece of advice. Try to have teams that can look at things holistically and indeed from A to Z with the collaboration of everyone in the company.
Brilliant. Okay, which is good. That's what we hear a lot from our audiences, and when we're, the discussions when we're talking to people in the market, the same. This not only collaboration but fusion and working end to end. So yes, that resonates very much. So, Marta, thank you very much. And I did forget to say at the beginning, obviously, we're going to be meeting in Amsterdam at the Transform Finance Financial Crime Leaders Summit on the 23rd of April. So yes, so anyone listening today will also be able to hear from Marta on the stage live in Amsterdam. So we're really looking forward to that, and look forward to welcoming you there as well.
Me too.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you so much for today and taking your time to join us. And as I said, well, we'll see you in Amsterdam.
See you in Amsterdam.
Thanks, Marta.
Thank you, Jay.